On April 20th, 2026, Northrop Grumman released a video for their FAXX 6th generation naval fighter concept. Northrop Grumman are making a ruthless, aggressive play to take back the deck of the American aircraft carrier. According to the Navy, the final winner-take-all contract for the Navy's FAXX fighter will be officially awarded in August of 2026. We are exactly 3 months away from a decision that will define American naval airpower for the next 50 years. It is a two-horse race, Northrop Grumman versus Boeing, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The aircraft shown is a large, twin-engine, tailless fighter featuring a distinct diamond-shaped main wing. But the two most critical takeaways are its intakes and its heritage. First, the Northrop design utilizes dorsal intakes, meaning the air intakes for the engines are located on the top of the aircraft, rather than underneath the fuselage or on the sides. From an aerodynamic standpoint, dorsal intakes are incredibly tricky. When a fighter jet pulls high angle of attack maneuvers during a dogfight, the fuselage of the aircraft can actually block the airflow to top-mounted intakes, stalling out the engines. So why use them? Because the FAXX is not being built to dogfight. It is being built to be an invisible, long-range sniper. By moving the engine intakes to the top of the jet, you completely free up the entire bottom of the aircraft. This gives Northrop the physical real estate to install a massive, continuous ventral weapons bay. The Navy desperately needs to carry the next generation of ultra-long-range anti-ship missiles and hypersonic cruise missiles. These weapons are huge. They physically do not fit inside the internal bays of an F-35. If you have to bolt a massive hypersonic missile to the outside of your stealth fighter, you instantly ruin its radar cross-section, turning a $100 million stealth jet into a glowing target on enemy radar. Northrop's dorsal intake design guarantees that these massive weapons can be carried internally. Furthermore, freeing up that internal space allows for a massive increase in internal fuel capacity. According to Northrop Grumman, without relying on vulnerable aerial refueling tankers, this jet boasts an unrefueled combat radius exceeding 1,500 kilometers. And if you look closely at the leading edge of the wings, you will see a massive nod to Northrop's past. The jet features leading-edge root extensions that look almost identical to the Northrop's legendary YF-23. They are blending proven 1990s stealth geometries with 2020's advanced materials. But Northrop Grumman does not have this contract in the bag. They are going head-to-head against Boeing, the undisputed king of the modern carrier deck. For the last 25 years, Boeing's Super Hornet has been the absolute backbone of U.S. naval aviation. Boeing knows how to build carrier aircraft. They know how to build rugged landing gear that can survive a 1,000 foot per minute impact, and they know how to engineer aircraft that can withstand the corrosive saltwater environment of the ocean. When Lockheed Martin formally withdrew from the FAXX competition, it left Boeing and Northrop in a binary shootout. Boeing's pitch for the FAXX is radically different from Northrop's. It's pitching a heavily modified, navalized variant of the F-47, the platform currently being developed for the Air Force's own next-generation air dominance program. The Boeing design features a more traditional ventral intake layout, intakes on the bottom or sides of the fuselage. It retains a tailless design for maximum broadband stealth, but interestingly, it incorporates canards near the nose for low-speed handling and pitch authority during the grueling carrier landing sequence. It also features standard naval folding wings to maximize space inside the cramped hangar bays of a Nimitz or Ford-class carrier. On paper, Boeing's approach sounds incredibly pragmatic. Take the 6th-generation fighter you are already developing for the Air Force, slap a tailhook on it, reinforce the landing gear, fold the wings, and sell it to the Navy. It saves research and development money, establishes a joint supply chain, and makes Congress incredibly happy. There is just one massive problem. The Navy absolutely hates that idea. Navy's FAXX program was officially initiated way back in 2012, but for years it only existed on paper. Why? Because the Congress refused to fund it. Lawmakers looked at the Navy and said, "The Air Force is building a 6th-generation fighter. You are going to join their program, build a naval variant of their jet, and save the taxpayers billions of dollars." The Navy's response was a polite but incredibly firm no. The Navy has deep institutional scars from the F-35 program. Because the Marine Corps demanded that their version, the F-35B, be capable of short takeoff and vertical landing, the entire physical architecture of the aircraft was compromised. The jet had to be single-engine, and it had to have a massive, fat fuselage to accommodate the vertical lift fan behind the cockpit. When you apply that physical geometry to the Navy's F-35C variant, it resulted in an aircraft that completely failed to meet the Navy's long-term strategic requirements. Because of the fat, single-engine design required by the Marines, the F-35C lacks the extreme unrefueled combat radius and the massive internal payload capacity that carrier strike groups require. The Navy swore they would never let that happen again. When the sixth-generation era arrived, the Navy absolutely refused to participate in Joint Strike Fighter 2.0. They demanded an independent airframe. They argued that the Air Force's requirement for a high-altitude, penetrating air superiority fighter was fundamentally incompatible with the Navy's need for a massive, ultra-long-range maritime strike platform. Furthermore, the Navy knew that in a joint program led by the Air Force gets the lion's share of the budget, the operational prioritization, and the industrial focus. The Navy would just be eating the scraps. So in 2020, the Navy formally established its own independent NGAD program office. It's a family of systems, includes autonomous loyal wingman drones, unmanned tankers, and electronic warfare platforms. The manned fighter at the center of that network is the FAXX. But drawing a line in the sand against Congress comes with severe consequences. In Washington, there is a saying, "The Pentagon asks, but Congress cuts the checks." And for the FAX, Congress brought a machete. In 2023, the Navy submitted a comprehensive 5-year research and development budget request. They asked for a total of $11.78 billion starting in fiscal year 2024 to rapidly accelerate the FAX into the prototyping and manufacturing phase. If that money was approved, the Navy's 6th-gen fighter was ready to take flight. Now, the Navy isn't stupid. In defense procurement, you always ask for more than you need, expecting Congress to trim the fat. They expected a haircut. What they got was a decapitation. Let's look at the actual numbers. For fiscal year 2024, the Navy requested $1.53 billion. Congress authorized just $400 million. For fiscal year 2025, the Navy requested $2.2 billion. Congress gutted it to $53.8 million. And for fiscal year 2026, the Navy originally requested $2.63 billion. Congress approved a paltry $74 million. $74 million for a 6th-generation fighter program. That isn't even enough money to keep the lights on in the engineering building. That is Congress explicitly strangling the program to death. To put that into perspective, for that exact same fiscal year 2026 budget, the Air Force's NGAD program received over $3.5 billion. The disparity was absurd. Congress was using the power of the purse to starve the Navy out, attempting to force them to abandon the FAXX and crawl back to Air Force's F-47 program. With funding completely drying up, industry analysts assumed the independent FAXX was dead. So why did Northrop Grumman and Boeing suddenly ramp up their massive PR and lobbying campaigns in late April 2026? Because behind closed doors, the Navy just pulled off a political miracle. In 2026, a major supplemental funding bill was pushed through the Armed Services Committee. A coalition of defense-minded lawmakers, heavily lobbied by Navy leadership and defense prime contractors, successfully executed a massive budget injection. For fiscal year 2026, the FAXX program was not only saved, it was supercharged. On top of the original $74 million, Congress injected an additional $897 million directly into the FAXX Research and Development Fund. But they didn't just give them money, they gave them legal armor. Hidden inside the text of the Defense Appropriations Act was a specific ironclad provision that strictly prohibited Congress or the Department of Defense from utilizing any administrative mechanisms to halt, pause, or merge the FAXX development. The program was legally protected. The independent Navy fighter was alive. This massive reversal is the exact reason we are seeing Northrop Grumman and Boeing taking their gloves off right now. With almost $1 billion of fresh R&D cash suddenly hitting the Navy's accounts, the August 2026 down select is back on. The winner of this contract will secure tens of billions of dollars in manufacturing revenue over the next 3 decades and effectively monopolize the carrier decks of the U.S. Navy. Why is the Navy fighting so hard and risking so much political capital for a 1,500-kilometer combat radius? Because in a potential war in the Pacific, range is the only thing that will keep American aircraft carriers from being sent to the bottom of the ocean. Over the last 2 decades, adversaries have built the most formidable anti-access and area denial network on the planet. The centerpiece of this network is their arsenal of anti-ship ballistic missiles. These weapons have an estimated operational range pushing well beyond 1,000 nautical miles. This is why Northrop Grumman's dorsal intake, heavy fuel design is so incredibly compelling for the Navy. The FAXX isn't just a fighter, it is the quarterback of the maritime domain. It will fly deep into the threat zone, completely silent on radar, and coordinate swarms of collaborative combat aircraft drones to overwhelm enemy air defenses. It is the ultimate evolution of American naval strike capability. As we speed toward the August 2026 decision, the military-industrial complex is holding its breath. Will the Navy choose Northrop Grumman's radical, purpose-built dorsal design, bringing the spirit of the F-14 Tomcat into the 21st century? Or will they yield to the logistical pragmatism of Boeing's navalized F-47, securing industrial commonality with the Air Force? Regardless of who wins, the resurrection of the FAXX budget proves one undeniable fact. The Navy refuses to surrender the skies, and they are willing to fight anyone, including the Congress, to ensure the aircraft carrier remains the deadliest weapon system on the face of the Earth. Alright guys, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I want to know what you guys think. Should the Navy go with Northrop's stealthy, ultra-long-range dorsal design, or should they save taxpayer money and just buy Boeing's navalized version of the Air Force's jet? Drop your thoughts down in the comments section below.